Let's bring in Jamil Jaffer now. He's the founder and director of the National Security Institute, also former associate White House counsel to President George W. Bush. All right, Jamil, is President Biden being hyperbolic, or is Putin getting desperate enough or feeling humiliated enough to pull the nuclear trigger?
Well, Arthel, certainly Vladimir Putin is concerned. He's faced a significant number of setbacks, and so he's probably feeling under significant pressure. Whether he'd actually use tactical nuclear weapons or not, it seems unlikely. President Biden, though, is making an important point, which is warning Putin off, perhaps in an awkward way, but try to warn Putin off from using such weapons. He's got to be tougher, though. He's got to be clear, and frankly, President Macron needs to be clear that we would come down very heavily on Vladimir Putin if he did so. That's what the world needs now, not sort of disagreements between allies about whether they're saying the right words or not.
Interesting take on that. So would a response be required? I mean, what could that response be? And how could a response, stop Putin without kicking off Armageddon?
Well, Arthel, I think the key is to actually try and deter this from happening altogether. And part of the reason why we see Putin in Ukraine and the like is that he doesn't think that the allies are going to get tough enough that they're going to respond effectively. And he's partially been right. We've gotten aggressive in terms of providing arms, but not more so. He's got to know that if he uses tactical nuclear weapons, that the allies, not just the United States, but our European allies, would intervene, would remove him completely from Ukraine, and potentially go further. He needs to know that's what's on the table if he's going to be deterred ahead of time.
Yeah, understood. And of course, we're not advocating for any sort of nuclear, reaction or aggression from Putin. Meanwhile, you've got Kim Jong-un, Kim Jong-un, who normally fires missiles, as you know, to get attention, appease his people. But he now is in the middle of very aggressive behavior. North Korea fired 2 ballistic missiles today off the East Coast, that's towards the Sea of Japan, towards Japan. Is Kim Jong-un's actions different this time, Jamil? I mean, is Japan in danger?
Well, we've seen Kim Jong-un do this before, so it's not completely out of character. The challenge is it's the pace and the rate at which he's doing it. We've seen now 24 separate missile launches of this year alone. That's almost 4 dozen missiles that he's launched. We know that he's working on new liquid-fueled and solid-fueled missiles that will allow him to get closer and closer to the United States. He's trying to create a submarine-launched ballistic missile. All of those actions are destabilizing. What we really need now is for the U.S. to put more pressure on China to reel Kim Jong-un in. Without China getting engaged, it's going to be very hard to do on our own.
Yeah, I mean, we're showing pictures, by the way, from North Korea of them firing this missile from a train. And you mentioned China because Russia and China, well, they continue to support and back North Korea. China with significant trade contracts with the United States, President Xi wanting to be taken seriously on the global stage. Still, though, he's undeterred from supporting Kim Jong-un. So why aren't there significant consequences for China?
Well, that's exactly right. We need to put significantly more pressure on China. The Biden administration has reduced the sanctions, the pressure that President Trump had put on China. We need to reimpose some of that pressure. We need to make clear to them their support of North Korea is not acceptable, their threats against Taiwan are not acceptable, and their treatment of 1 million Muslims in Xinjiang province is also unacceptable.
So there's a lot going on. We just highlighted Russia and Ukraine. The bridge linking Russia to Crimea has been blown up. You've got Kim Jong-un acting out more than he ever has before. Where is all this headed? If you could sum this up for us in terms of what we, Americans, just regular people watching this, feeling very anxious about it. What are we to take away from this?
I think, Arthel, this is what happens when America is not viewed as strong in the world, when America is viewed as not backing its allies and not being, aggressive against its adversaries. We've seen now too many presidents in a row afraid to use American power and frightened by it. And as a result, we're not frightening our enemies. We're not emboldening our allies. That's what we need to do more of, is we need to be tough and strong and demonstrate to the world that we are a superpower. We remain in the game.
Understood. But does that mean bringing more troops perhaps into hot wars?
It doesn't have to.
The American people don't want that. Go ahead, Jamil. Sorry.
Right. No, you're exactly right, Arthel. The American people are tired after a long war in Afghanistan, a long war in Iraq that we're now out of. The American people don't want to see American troops deployed, but the safest way to assure that American troops aren't needed to be deployed overseas is to deter our allies, our enemies from acting. And that's what we need to do. Unfortunately, our enemies don't see us as a real threat, and as a result, they tend to act out like we've seen with Vladimir Putin, like we've seen with Iran in the Middle East, and like we're seeing now with North Korea in Asia.
Jamil Jaffer, thank you very much, as always, and we'll be right back.